So on this one, we're going to talk about 7 fail-proof warm season crops that you can replant in the fall. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a spectacular day. It is Monday, July 24th here in South Georgia, and believe it or not, we've already had a ton of people asking about fall gardening. So I figured on these next few videos we'd talk about fall gardening, what you can plant in the fall. That way everybody have plenty of time to get their seeds, get their transplants going, and have a beautiful fall garden. So as you've probably heard me say before, fall is my favorite time to be out here in the garden. That's when the temperatures finally cool down a little bit. We get some nice crisp in the air, and there's so many different things we can grow in the fall garden down here in South Georgia. Warm season and cool season veggies kind of at the same time. In the spring garden, there's a lot of cool season veggies we can't grow or can't grow really well because they don't always like how fast things warm up for us in the spring going into summer. But the fall provides us an opportunity to grow so many different things. Now, because there are so many different things we can plant down here in the fall garden, it's probably too much to cover on a single video. That's why we're going to split this up into several videos. So on this one, we're going to talk about 7 fail-proof warm season crops that you can replant in the fall. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you know we like to do a lot of experimentation. We like to try to push the envelope as far as our growing season goes. So there's a lot of things that we have tried to grow in the fall and did okay with them. Things like pumpkin, watermelons. We're not going to mention those on this list. We're going to stick with things that are much easier to grow in the fall. I'm also not going to talk about tomatoes because I don't grow fall tomatoes. It can be done. I'm sure there's plenty of information out there on it, but since we don't grow fall tomatoes, I'm not putting them on the list. So now let's get into our list. Number 1, easy warm season crop to replant in the fall would be summer squash. So this right here is our second planting of summer squash / zucchini. Wouldn't call this a fall planting. This is more like a midsummer planting. These plants are not going to make it into the fall. We've already had some vine borers do a little damage, taking out a few plants here and there, but these have been pretty productive for us for midsummer squash. So when these plants are done in say a few weeks, we can turn around and plant some more to give us some continual production into the fall months. Now, there are a heap of good squash and zucchini varieties out there for fall planting. As I've told you before, I like all those squash varieties that end with the word prize. I think there's Enterprise, Grand Prize, Gold Prize. All those are really good. This Pantheon zucchini we have growing here now, it'd be really good. There's also another zucchini variety, a yellow one called Golden Glory. It's really good as well. And then number 2 on the list would be what we have right here behind me, cucumbers. Now, much like that summer squash I just showed you, I don't know that I'd really call this a fall planting of cucumbers, more of a mid to late summer planting. Got a little bit of cleanup in here to do, but these Corinto cucumbers are looking really nice for this time of year. Now, these may produce on into the fall months a little bit. It hasn't been long since we planted these, but you can plant cucumbers in the late summer, early fall months and get some nice production. So if you have an empty trellis where maybe you were growing some pole beans, maybe some tomatoes or some other type of vegetable that needs a trellis, and you want to use that trellis again, great way to use it is plant some fall cucumbers on it. And then number 3 on our list would be corn, specifically sweet corn. Field corn can take a lot longer to mature sometimes, so it can be a little risky, a little harder to grow field corn in the fall. But sweet corn, especially these hybrid varieties like the Troubadour right here, mature pretty fast and are a great way to enjoy some delicious corn on the cob in the fall months. Now, much like that squash and those cucumbers I showed you earlier, this is technically not a fall planting of sweet corn, more a mid to late summer planting. But many, many years we have planted in, say, late August and enjoyed some delicious sweet corn in the fall. Now, a couple important things to note here about growing fall sweet corn. Your plants are probably not going to get as tall as they normally would. That goes back to that whole heat units discussion we had a couple videos ago. Also, your worm pressure is probably going to be a lot higher in the fall as opposed to spring. So you just want to keep some of that good spinosad on hand. That way you can start treating for worms as soon as you start seeing some damage. And number 4 on our list would be beans or cowpeas, aka field peas. Now, you can certainly grow bush beans in the fall. Those usually mature pretty fast, but I really like growing climbing beans or climbing peas just because they're a lot easier to pick, and we can also usually get a greater harvest in a small space. So in previous years, we've grown several different types of climbing lima beans. On this arch panel trellis here, we've done the Christmas lima beans, the King of Garden lima beans, and in just a little while, once these sunflowers get a little bit taller, we're going to be planting some climbing cowpeas on those Tennessee purple peas that we grew last year. And if you didn't want something you had to shell, a trellis like this is also perfect for growing some rattlesnake green beans in the fall. That way you just pick them, snap them, throw them in a pot. And then number 5 on our list would be these beauties right here, good old taters. Now, as you can see here, the taters from our spring harvest, especially this Baltic Rose variety, are holding up really well underneath the barn on that rack of hardware cloth with that cheap plastic tablecloth on top. So we've probably got plenty of taters to last us well into the fall. But maybe you've only got a few taters left, maybe a little bucket full, and they're starting to form some sprouts. You can plant those and multiply them. Now, we were unsuccessful with growing fall taters for several years before we started being successful the last couple years. So I'll tell you a couple things I've learned. Seems like planting whole taters does better in the fall. They seem to rot faster in the ground when it's hot and humid outside still a little bit in late summer. So I'd recommend planting the whole tater and make sure you've got some sprouts on these things. That way they can hit the ground running. You don't want them just sitting in the soil waiting on them to break dormancy and starting to form sprouts. Now, number 6 on our list isn't going to apply to as many people as some of the other things we've already mentioned on the list, and that would be okra. So here we have this planting of dwarf cowhorn okra. It has given us a lot of good groceries. These plants are looking amazing, especially considering we haven't fertilized these at all. They're just really liking this no-till plot. And these plants will probably continue producing for us well on into the fall. But I always like to plant one more round of okra for the fall just so I can get my feel of it before it starts getting cold. We start getting freezing temperatures and we don't have okra anymore. So way back over there on the other side of the dream garden where I need to pull up a few of those tomato plants, probably going to plant me a row of that Ruiz okra in the next month or 2. And then number 7, which is technically not something you can eat, but something that's great to have in your garden during the fall, would be flowers. And there's a lot of different things to choose from. Just a few that we really like are these giant marigolds here. We love the zinnias, all kind of different colors, the white ones, some of these Queenie series zinnias we have here, and then sunflowers like we have planted on that arch trellis there. Sunflowers are great to grow in the fall. And if you dig around online a bit, you can find some nice fall colors of sunflowers. They're not all yellow. You can find some brown ones, some kind of dark orange ones, some nice colors that coincide with the flavors of fall. So those are 7 warm season crops that are pretty easy to grow in the fall. Yes, there are a lot more warm season things you can plant again in the fall, but they're not always easy to grow. So that's why we kept the list just to 7. So I've gave you some ideas for planting as far as warm season crops go. Now you're probably wondering, well, when do I need to plant based on where I live, based on my planting zone? Now this part is pretty easy, but some of it will vary a little bit just depending on how big of a risk taker you are. So the first thing you want to do is just go online and look up the average first frost date from your area. Then take what you're wanting to grow, take a look at the back of the seed packet, look at the days of maturity, count back from your average first frost date, and you at least want to be planting by then. If we're talking fall taters, for example, take your average first frost date, count back 90 or 100 days. That's usually how long it takes most tater varieties to produce. You want to make sure you've planted by then. If the frost kills those tater plants, not a big deal. I've had that happen several years. The frost will kill the plants, and then we'll come in there the next day or so and dig up our taters. So frost is not going to hurt the taters in the ground, but it will zap the plants. And the one thing that's going to give you a little more leniency or a little more room to play with in the fall is that whole heat unit discussion we had a couple videos ago. So if your heat units are really high, things are going to mature faster than that date listed on the back of the seed packet. In that case, you've got a little more cushion, got a little more wiggle room before your first frost date. So I hope you enjoyed the video today. Let me know in the comments below what warm season crops you're replanting this fall, and if there are any changes you would make to the list we provided. As always, you can find our affiliate links and coupon codes in the description below. Also, go check out our website, lazydogfarm.com. And if you missed that video on the heat units, you can check it out right here. Really neat stuff. We'll show you how to calculate the heat units for your area, so you can get a pretty good approximation of how fast something is going to grow. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.